They say family is supposed to come first, blood over everything. But when my brother needed me most, I put myself ahead of him. I told myself it was just one small choice, that he'd understand, that it wouldn't change anything between us. But I was wrong. That decision cut deeper than I ever imagined. It cost him more than I'll ever be able to repay, and it cost me the bond we built since childhood. I betrayed him once, and I've been paying for it every day since. Growing up, my brother and I were inseparable. We weren't just siblings. We were teammates, co-conspirators, best friends. If one of us got in trouble, the other took the heat too. If one of us celebrated, the other was right there, louder than anyone else in the room. People used to say, "Those two against the world," and it felt true. He was the kind of brother who always showed up. When I broke my arm falling off my bike, he sprinted home barefoot to get help. When I had my first heartbreak, he sat with me for hours, handing me tissues and saying the dumbest jokes until I finally laughed. He didn't always have much, but whatever he had, he shared with me without a second thought. And for a long time, I thought I lived by the same code. Family first. Always. But somewhere along the way, life tested that rule, and I failed. It didn't happen in a dramatic fight. There were no screaming matches, no fists thrown. It was quieter, uglier than that. It was the kind of betrayal that hides under the surface of a choice that feels practical at the time, a decision you justify by telling yourself you deserve something, that it's not such a big deal. Until later, when you realize it was everything. My brother trusted me with something important. He believed that no matter what, I'd put us before myself. And for years, I would have sworn I always would. But when the moment came, when he needed me to stand by him, I chose the easier road, the safer option, the one that benefited me while leaving him exposed. I can still see the look on his face when he realized. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even disappointment. It was worse than both. It was silence. The kind of silence that says, "You're not the person I thought you were." And he was right. People like to believe betrayal is dramatic, but sometimes it's as simple as standing aside when you should have stood tall. Sometimes it's keeping quiet when you should have spoken up. Sometimes it's taking what you know you shouldn't, because you tell yourself you'll make it right later, and later never comes. That's what I did. And from that day forward, I haven't been able to look at myself in the mirror the same way. He doesn't talk about it anymore. We still see each other on holidays, exchange polite words, smile for the family photos. But underneath it all, there's a wall between us that I built, brick by brick, with my choice. This isn't just a story about losing my brother's trust. It's about losing a part of myself in the process. Because when you betray someone who's always had your back, you don't just lose them. You lose the version of you that deserved them in the first place. It started with an opportunity that should have brought us closer, not torn us apart. My brother had been working on something for months, a small project, nothing earth-shattering, but something that mattered to him. He poured his time, his savings, and his pride into it. I watched him stay up late night after night, sketching ideas, crunching numbers, and chasing leads. He wasn't just chasing a dream. He was building it from the ground up. When he finally came to me, it wasn't with fanfare. He sat me down at the kitchen table, papers spread out between us, his eyes bright in a way I hadn't seen in years. "I want you in on this," he said. "I can't do it alone. But with you, I know we can make it work." It wasn't just an invitation, it was trust. He wasn't asking for money or resources I didn't have. He was asking for me. My time, my word, my loyalty. The same loyalty he had given me countless times without hesitation. I nodded, maybe too quickly, telling him I was on board. He grinned, that wide grin that always made me feel like we were kids again, scheming about how to build a treehouse or sneak out past curfew. In that moment, I believed myself. I believed I'd stand by him. But then came the test. Not long after, I got my own offer. A chance to move ahead at work. A promotion dangled in front of me that came with more money, more stability, more recognition. On paper, it was everything I'd wanted. The catch? It demanded my full focus, long hours, weekends included. It left no room for side projects, no room for my brother's dream. I told myself I could do both, at least at first. That I could help him in small ways, even if I wasn't fully committed. I told myself he'd understand, that he'd be proud of me for advancing my career, that it wasn't betrayal, it was practicality. But practicality is just betrayal dressed up in polite excuses. The night I broke the news to him, he didn't get angry. He just looked at me across the table, his face unreadable, and asked, "So that's it?" You're out. I stammered, tried to soften it. Not out. Just, I can't give it the time you need. But I'll support you however I can. He nodded slowly, but his eyes told me everything. He didn't need my scraps of time or my empty encouragement. He needed me to stand beside him the way he always had for me. And I had chosen myself instead. That was the moment something cracked between us. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just gathered his papers, stacked them neatly, and said, I get it. But the silence that followed said more than any argument could. I told myself it wasn't final, that I'd make it up to him later. But later never came. In the days that followed, I tried to convince myself it wasn't such a big deal. I told myself my brother was strong, that he'd find a way forward without me. After all, hadn't he always been the resilient one? The kid who took punches at school for me, the teenager who worked double shifts so I didn't have to? If anyone could handle disappointment, it was him. That was the story I told myself, until I saw what it looked like in real life. The first sign was his silence. Normally, he'd text me updates, even if it was something small. Met with a supplier today, or got a lead on funding. But after our conversation, the messages stopped. He didn't call to ask my opinion, didn't swing by to show me what he was working on. For the first time in our lives, I was watching him from the outside. When I finally asked how things were going, he shrugged. It's fine, he said, but his voice carried a weight I couldn't ignore. He was doing it alone now, and we both knew it. The second sign came from our friends. One of them pulled me aside at a barbecue and asked, Hey, I thought you and your brother were doing that thing together? He said you bailed. The word bailed stung like a slap. I mumbled something about work, about timing, about how I still supported him. But I could see it in their eyes. They weren't buying it. And neither was I. Meanwhile, my new promotion swallowed me whole. Late nights at the office, weekends tied up with projects, endless meetings that drained me. On the surface, I was succeeding. My boss praised me, my paycheck was bigger, and people congratulated me for moving up. But every small victory felt hollow. I'd catch myself glancing at my phone, half hoping for a text from my brother, even just a quick update. Nothing came. Then I saw him one evening, hunched over in a coffee shop with papers spread out, the same look of determination I'd seen months earlier. Only now, it was tinged with exhaustion. He looked up, spotted me, and gave a polite nod. Not the enthusiastic wave he used to give, not the grin that always made me feel like we were still kids. Just a nod. I walked over, trying to bridge the gap. How's it going? I asked. He hesitated, then said, It's moving. Slowly. I offered the only thing I could. If you need anything, let me know. His eyes flicked up at me, and for a second, I thought I saw all the words he wanted to say. I needed you then, not now. I needed your presence, not your pity. But he stayed quiet, gave a tight smile, and went back to his notes. That was when the weight of my choice truly hit me. It wasn't just that I had chosen my own path. It was that in doing so, I had left him alone to carry his. And no matter how much I tried to justify it, the truth was simple. He had always been there for me. And the one time he asked for the same, I wasn't. The breaking point came faster than I expected. My brother had landed a meeting with a potential investor, the kind of opportunity that could have taken his project out of the coffee shops and late nights and into something real. And he asked me, one last time, to come with him. I remember the phone call. His voice was steady but carried an edge of hope. I could use someone by my side, he said. You don't have to do anything, just be there. You know how to talk to people. It would help. It was such a simple request. No late nights, no financial risk, no commitment beyond showing up. And yet, when the day came, I told him I couldn't. I had a big meeting at work, the kind that promised even more advancement. I chose the conference room over my brother. Again, when I broke the news, he didn't argue. He just said, okay, in a tone so flat it barely sounded human. Later that night, I found out the meeting had gone badly. A mutual friend who knew one of the investors told me my brother had stumbled, lost his train of thought, looked nervous sitting there alone. The investor passed. Another door closed. I wanted to tell myself it wasn't my fault, that one rejection doesn't end a dream. But I knew better. I knew I could have steadied him, backed him up, given him the confidence he needed. And instead, I let him walk in alone. When I saw him a few days later, I tried to ask how it went. He shrugged. It's done. They weren't interested. I said, there'll be other chances. He looked at me for a long time before replying. Not everything gets another chance. The silence that followed was heavier than anything we'd shared before. For the first time in our lives, I didn't know how to talk to him. I didn't know how to fix it. The moment crystallized when we sat down at our parents' house for Sunday dinner. Normally, we'd sit side by side, trading jokes, backing each other up in family conversations. That night, he chose the chair at the far end of the table. He didn't laugh at my jokes. He didn't look my way. And when our mother asked how his project was going, he smiled politely and said, "It's fine." No mention of me. No glance in my direction. For years, I had been part of every sentence he spoke about his dreams. That night, it was as if I didn't exist. That was when I knew the damage was permanent. Not because of one meeting, not because of one opportunity lost, but because my brother had finally seen me for what I was. Someone who didn't show up when it counted. And once someone sees you that way, you can't make them unsee it. After that failed investor meeting, the distance between us wasn't just emotional. It became visible, something everyone could feel. We still saw each other at family gatherings, still exchanged the polite, "How's work?" small talk. But the bond that once held us together was gone, replaced by a hollow politeness that cut deeper than anger ever could. For years, my brother had been the one person I could rely on to fill the silence, to pull me back when I drifted. Now, silence was all he gave me. I noticed it first with our friends. We had always been a pair, the two brothers who showed up together, who people expected as a set. But slowly, invitations started arriving with just his name on them. I'd see pictures online of him at dinners, barbecues, even trips we would have planned together once. And I wasn't there. No one said anything to me directly, but I could read between the lines. He didn't want me there, and no one wanted to get caught in the middle. The hardest part was at home with our parents. They noticed, of course. My mom asked why we weren't spending as much time together. My dad looked at me across the dinner table, brows furrowed, but didn't press. I could feel the disappointment in the room, unspoken but heavy. They had raised us to have each other's backs, and I had broken that rule. One night, I stayed after dinner to help clean up, and my mom finally asked directly, "What happened between you two? You used to be inseparable." I opened my mouth, but no words came. How could I tell her the truth? That when my brother needed me, I had chosen myself? That I had let ambition and fear outweigh loyalty? So I lied. I said, "We're just busy." But I could tell she didn't believe me. The fallout hit hardest when my brother stopped calling altogether. No texts, no check-ins, no late-night jokes. For the first time in my life, I realized what it felt like to be outside his world. And the truth was unbearable. It was lonely. The guilt gnawed at me in ways I couldn't shake. I'd sit at my desk at work, the job I had chosen over him, and wonder if the promotion had been worth it. The meetings, the emails, the small raises, none of it filled the hole where my brother used to be. What made it worse was that he never lashed out. He never confronted me, never shouted. He simply let me fade from his life, and that quiet rejection was a punishment sharper than any fight could have been. I had betrayed him, and he had responded in the cruelest way possible, by moving on without me. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to lose someone who was still alive. And the cruel irony was that I hadn't just lost my brother. I had lost the only version of myself that I ever truly liked, the one who stood by him, the one who believed family came first. Now, all I had left was the version of me that put ambition over loyalty. And every time I looked in the mirror, that was the man staring back. Guilt has a way of lingering, even when no one mentions it out loud. For me, it became a constant background noise, a low hum that never shut off. No matter where I was, at work, at home, even in the middle of conversations, it was always there, reminding me of the choice I made and the brother I lost. At work, colleagues congratulated me on my promotion, told me how impressed they were with my progress. I smiled, said thank you, played the part of the man on the rise. But inside, the words felt hollow. Every success was poisoned by the thought of what it had cost me. I had the title, the paycheck, the recognition, but I didn't have my brother. And without him, none of it mattered. Nights were worse. The quiet of my apartment felt suffocating. I'd lie in bed replaying every moment that led to the fracture. The phone call I brushed off, the meeting I skipped, the look in his eyes when he realized I wasn't coming through. Sleep rarely came, and when it did, it came with dreams where we were still kids, running down the block together, laughing like the world was ours. Waking up from those dreams felt like being punished twice. Even little things reminded me. Passing a basketball court where we used to play until dark. Hearing a song he loved come on the radio. Seeing a pair of brothers on the subway, nudging each other and laughing. Each moment was a mirror held up to me, reflecting the man I had become, the one who walked away when it mattered most. I tried to drown the guilt in productivity, throwing myself into work, into long hours, into projects that didn't matter but kept me busy. It didn't help. The guilt seeped through the cracks, waiting for me in the pauses. The heaviest part was knowing he never demanded anything from me except presence. He didn't need my money, my skills, my connections. He just needed me to stand by his side. And I had failed him in the simplest way possible, by not showing up. Sometimes, I wondered if it would have been easier if he had yelled at me, cursed me out, cut me down in anger. At least then, I could have fought back, tried to defend myself, maybe even found a way to argue our way back to each other. But he didn't. He let the silence do the work. And silence is harder to fight. That's the weight I carried every day. The knowledge that I had betrayed not just my brother, but the bond we built since childhood. And the punishment wasn't a dramatic fallout. It was the cold, steady absence of someone who had once been my other half. Guilt isn't something you get over. It's something you learn to live with. And for me, it became the lens through which I saw everything else. Every accomplishment looked smaller. Every relationship felt fragile. Every reflection in the mirror carried the same verdict. You failed the one person who always counted on you. And there's no promotion, no paycheck, no applause in the world that drowns that out. Eventually, the guilt became too heavy to carry in silence. I told myself I couldn't keep pretending we were just busy brothers who drifted apart. I had to try, even if the attempt fell flat. So I planned my apology like a strategy, rehearsing it over and over on my commute, in the shower, in the dark before sleep. The chance came one Saturday when I knew he'd be at our parents' house. I drove over early, palms sweating against the steering wheel. I hadn't felt this nervous since I was a kid about to confess to breaking something in the house. He was outside, fixing the old fence in the yard, sleeves rolled up, sweat on his forehead. I stood there for a full minute before walking up, rehearsed lines tangled in my throat. "Need a hand?" I asked. He glanced at me, then back at the fence. "I've got it." Still, I picked up a hammer and started holding boards in place. For a while, the only sound was wood splintering and nails being driven in. Finally, I broke the silence. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. He didn't look up. For what? It was a test, and I knew it. I swallowed hard. For not showing up. For choosing myself over you. For being the brother you couldn't count on. The words hung in the air, heavier than the boards we were holding. He finally set down the hammer and turned to face me. "You think an apology fixes it?" he asked, his voice sharp. "No," I admitted. "I know it doesn't. I need you to know I see it now. I know I failed you, and I hate myself for it." His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he was going to walk away. But instead, he sighed, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You don't get it. It's not about hating you. It's about not being able to trust you anymore. And without trust, what's left?" The words cut deep, but they were honest. I nodded, blinking back the sting in my eyes. "I get it. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm not even asking you to forgive me right now. I'm just asking, is there any way to start again?" He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head slightly. "I don't know. Maybe. But it's not on your timeline. It's on mine." It wasn't the reconciliation I had fantasized about. There was no hug, no "we'll figure this out," no sudden return to brotherhood. But there was something, a crack in the wall, small but real. That night, I drove home with mixed feelings. I hadn't fixed anything, but I had said what needed to be said. And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe there was still a sliver of hope, fragile as it was. But hope is dangerous, because sometimes it keeps you going, and sometimes it sets you up for another fall. For a little while, I convinced myself things were getting better. After that day fixing the fence, my brother started responding to my texts again. Not long conversations, not like before, but at least he didn't leave me on read anymore. A quick yeah or okay felt like progress. And progress, however small, was enough for me to build hope on. We even had one night that almost felt normal. It was our dad's birthday, and the whole family went out to dinner. For the first time in years, my brother and I ended up sitting next to each other. We shared a few quiet jokes about how our dad still mispronounced the name of his favorite wine, and for a brief moment, I felt the old rhythm return. It wasn't full laughter, but it was a spark, and I clung to it. That week, I convinced myself we were turning a corner. I started imagining us grabbing a beer again, maybe even talking about the project he had once asked me to join. I thought maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance to rebuild. But hope can be cruel. A few days later, I heard from a mutual friend that my brother was pitching his project again, this time to a new investor. The same kind of meeting he had begged me to attend before. Only this time, he didn't tell me about it. I found out secondhand, through someone else's excitement. I tried to shrug it off, telling myself maybe he just didn't want to jinx it. But deep down, I knew the truth. He didn't tell me because I wasn't part of it anymore. He couldn't risk relying on me again. When I asked him about it later, casually, he just said, "Yeah, I had a meeting. It went okay." His tone was neutral, flat. No invitation to dig deeper. No sign he wanted me to share in it. That was when it hit me. The little sparks of hope weren't signs of repair. They were just polite gestures, the kind you give someone who used to matter but doesn't anymore. The setback landed harder than I expected. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't yell, didn't accuse me of anything. He just moved forward without me, and that was worse. I drove home that night with the radio off, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I had thought we were slowly stitching something back together. But the truth was, I was the only one holding a needle. He had already decided the fabric wasn't worth repairing. And maybe he was right. Hope had given me a glimpse of what used to be, but the setback forced me to see what really was. My brother wasn't waiting for me to change anymore. He had already learned how to live without me. And the cruelest part? I was the one who taught him how. The real breaking point for me didn't come with a fight or some explosive confrontation. It came with absence. One weekend, my parents hosted a family barbecue, the kind of thing my brother and I never missed growing up. Back then, we'd be the ones manning the grill, teasing each other about who burned the burgers, fighting over the last piece of corn on the cob. But this time, I showed up alone. My brother wasn't there. At first, I thought maybe he was running late. But an hour passed, then two. Finally, my mom sighed and said quietly, "He told me he couldn't make it." She didn't look at me when she said it, and I didn't need her to. I knew. He wasn't avoiding the family. He was avoiding me. I sat there, surrounded by laughter and conversation, feeling like a stranger in my own family. Every time someone mentioned his name, my stomach twisted. When my dad raised a glass and said, "To family," I forced a smile, but inside I felt hollow. Driving home that night, the silence in the car was unbearable. I kept replaying every choice, every moment I let him down, as if maybe I'd spot the exact second I lost him for good. But the truth was, it wasn't 1 second. It was all of them. It was death by 1,000 cuts, each ignored plea, each broken promise, each time I chose myself over him. The darkest moment came a week later, when I saw him by chance. I was walking downtown after work, and there he was on the other side of the street, laughing with a group of people. He looked happy, genuinely happy, in a way I hadn't seen in years. And I wasn't part of it. For a second, our eyes met. Just a flicker of recognition. I lifted a hand, a reflex more than anything. He gave a small nod, polite, nothing more, and turned back to his friends. It hit me like a punch to the chest. I wasn't his other half anymore. I wasn't even a friend. I was just someone he used to know. That night, I sat in my apartment with the lights off, staring at the wall. The weight of it all finally crushed me. I had chosen ambition, security, success, all the things I thought mattered. But none of them meant anything in that moment. I would have traded every dollar, every title, every ounce of recognition just to sit across from my brother and hear him laugh with me again. But that version of us was gone, and I was the one who killed it. The loneliness was so sharp it bordered on physical pain. I thought about calling him, begging him to let me in again. But I didn't, because deep down, I knew he had already answered. His absence, his silence, his new life without me. That was his answer. And in that silence, I finally understood the full cost of my betrayal. I hadn't just lost my brother. I had lost the only person who ever believed I'd never betray him in the first place. Acceptance came slowly, like a storm clearing after it's already destroyed everything in its path. I kept waiting for some dramatic reconciliation, a big conversation, a fight that ended in tears, maybe even a hug. But that moment never came. What came instead was silence. And eventually, I had to learn to live inside it. For months, I carried the guilt like a punishment I deserved. I tried reaching out a few more times, a call on his birthday, a text on a holiday, even a clumsy attempt to meet for coffee. Sometimes he responded, sometimes he didn't. When he did, it was polite but detached, like talking to a distant acquaintance, not the brother I had once trusted with my life. At first, that distance broke me. But then, slowly, it became my reality. I realized one night, sitting alone in my apartment, staring at my phone for a reply that never came. He wasn't going to let me back in. And maybe he was right not to. Trust, once broken, doesn't always heal. Sometimes it just leaves a scar that never fades. So I stopped waiting. I stopped rehearsing apologies in my head, stopped imagining scenarios where we fixed everything. Instead, I turned inward. I asked myself what kind of man I wanted to be. Not for him, not even for redemption, but because I couldn't stand the version of me who had betrayed him. I started making small changes. I showed up for people in ways I hadn't before. If a friend needed help moving, I was there. If a coworker asked for support, I gave it. It didn't erase the past, but it reminded me that I was still capable of loyalty, of presence, of being someone reliable. Most of all, I learned to sit with the weight of my choice. Not to numb it, not to escape it, but to let it remind me of what I never want to repeat. I won't pretend I found peace. Some nights, I still wake up thinking about the look in his eyes that day. Not anger, not hate, but disappointment so sharp it carved into me. I don't think that will ever leave me. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the weight of guilt isn't meant to vanish. Maybe it's meant to shape you, to force you to carry the lesson so you never forget it. When people ask about my brother now, I tell them the truth. We don't talk much anymore. They don't press, and I don't offer more. It's not their story to know. It's mine to carry. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Sometimes you only get one chance to show up for the people who matter. Miss it, and you don't just lose them. You lose the part of yourself that believed you never would. That's who I am now. A man who had everything that mattered, and let it slip away for something that didn't. And I'll carry that truth for the rest of my life. When I look back, the part that hurts the most isn't the choice itself. It's how ordinary it felt in the moment. I didn't set out to betray my brother. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to throw away our bond. It happened in a single decision, disguised as practicality, wrapped in excuses that sounded reasonable. That's how betrayal usually comes. Quiet. Ordinary. I told myself I was chasing stability, security, success. And I got all of those things. But none of them kept me warm the way my brother's presence once did. None of them filled the silence he left behind. The truth is, I thought we'd have endless chances. I thought there would always be another moment to show up, another time to prove my loyalty. But life doesn't hand out endless chances. Sometimes you get one. And if you waste it, you carry that loss forever. I still see him, of course, at holidays, at family gatherings, passing moments that used to be filled with laughter. Now they're filled with polite nods and short answers. We play the role of brothers in public, but behind it, we're just two men divided by a choice I can't undo. Some nights, I let myself imagine a different version of our story, one where I stood beside him, where his dream took off, where we celebrated the victories together. It's a good fantasy, but that's all it is. A version of us that exists only in the space between guilt and sleep. If you're reading this, and you've got someone who trusts you, don't wait. Don't assume tomorrow will give you another chance to prove you've got their back. Because when the moment comes, and you fail, there may not be another. That's what I live with now. The knowledge that I had a brother who believed I'd never let him down, and I showed him he was wrong. The world sees me as successful, but inside, I'll always know the truth. I traded my brother's trust for a paycheck, and I've been bankrupt ever since. Final line, some debts you can pay off. Betraying family isn't one of them.